Whether you're new to pool and practicing the basics, or a more experienced player performing drills to improve your shot making and positional play, the Drill Partner is perfect.
Mr. Pinozzo, sir, welcome back to another show. How are you?
It's been a while.
It's been yeah. You're looking a little thinner, Mike. Looking a little thinner, a little younger. A lot of good things, a lot of positive things for sure, man. Are you doing all
Yeah,
right?
like everything's good.
We've been busy, and I appreciate you making time during
Yeah, no,
these days.
it's been some great guests. We got another one today.
Yeah,
Kind of all over the spectrum with you know, politicos like Shane and juniors like Sophia and not juniors like our next guest.
yep. Legends of the game. I think the last time I might have seen our guest Nick Varner, I didn't go to Derby this year, so I guess you know what. Now that I think about it, it might have been Junior Nationals last year because I'm pretty sure he played in the inaugural hayball thing they had out there, the American Hayball Championships or whatever it was.
Okay.
Um, but it's a different kind of show, Mike. It's always tough whenever these legends pass away. And last week there was a news of Buddy Hall leaving us, Mike. And so I wanted to bring you on. Your history with Buddy and covering the sport as long as you have, and our guest. Let's see if we can bring him on in here. Nick Varner, can you hear us all right?
Yes.
Yeah.
How you guys doing?
Good.
Good, Nick. How are you doing?
Good.
Appreciate you making time for us. I don't really know how to start here, Mike. Maybe you can kind of take the lead a little bit.
Well, obviously we're all saddened by, Buddy's passing, but it gives us, some good opportunities to kind of reflect on Buddy's life and his career. There's a lot of, younger players who I don't think know as much about Buddy as they do some of the other players like yourself or Mike Siegel or Earl or these more high profile players. Buddy was not, he was not one of those guys who traveled to all the international tournaments and played in Mosconi Cups. And those are all because he just never really, he was certainly capable and would have been picked on some of those early teams, but he just didn't, he wasn't going overseas. He wasn't traveling. It was tough to get him to go down a plane to LA. There's a lot of players who probably don't know as much about Buddy as they should, because he was certainly in that, Nick, I don't know if you remember on Billiards Digest Live not long ago, we had that kind of poll where we talked about the top 10 players of the last 50 years, top 10 American players, and pretty much everybody had Buddy in their top 5. He was that kind of player. And being, from that Kentucky, Illinois border area there, you were certainly close enough to him. Tell us a little bit about your earliest recollections of Buddy, which I think goes back to Johnson City, right?
Yeah, I met him at Johnson. I met him in Johnson City in 1970. So
1970.
Goes back 55 years.
He was tall and thin in 1970.
Yeah, and I seen some of the pictures posted on Facebook, and wow, he looked good.
What do you remember about him when you met him the first time, as far as, had you heard about him before that you met him? When you watched him play, what were your thoughts about 1970s Buddy Hall?
Well, he was already pretty well a champion by then, and he was and he concentrated on he was probably more into the gambling. He spent a lot of time in Shreveport, Louisiana, where anybody could come there and get played. I guess he lived there several years because he had a good steak horse there, and I never heard about anybody getting out of there with any money.
Yeah, Buddy didn't book too many losers.
No. I still remember that Reds when Cesar Morales came to the United States, and he won the first tournament there he played in, and Buddy challenged him to a match after the tournament was over, and they played seven ahead for 5,000 apiece, and it lasted 9 games. Buddy won 8-1, and
Wait a minute. So this is after the infamous Efren's first big tournament win here in the U.
Yeah.
yeah, it was
Like,
right after the same night, Sunday night, and the last night after the tournament was over, and Buddy won the set, and then he said, "Flip the coin, let the 20 ride," and he said, "Let's play." Well, he had 10 now, so he said, "Let the 10 ride." And Ephraim left, and I asked Buddy a few months later. I said, "Did you all play the next day?" Because Ephraim said he'd be in the next day, but he said that uh, he waited to Wednesday, but Ephraim never showed up.
But then when Buddy left town on Thursday, Efren showed up the next night.
Well, Buddy said that he found out that Ephraim showed up 20 minutes later after he left town.
that's a great story.
That's
But
great stuff.
he was tough. He was, he's certainly a big candidate when you're talking about the best of all time in 9 ball,
Yeah.
and he's a fooler. I can't believe one time I was talking to him, and he always liked to pick up my cues and hit balls, and my tip was about the size of a dime. He said, "Man, you're ready for a new tip." I said, "No, because those uh, tips that I played with in those days, thinner the better. I liked them." And I said, "There's a couple, 2 or 3 wins left in this cue," and he laughed, and of course that laugh of his was infectious. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
remember one term I was playing in, I was sitting up at the top of the bleachers, and probably 50 feet from the table he's playing on. I was watching these matches, and boy, that Buddy somehow, I guess my voice must have carried or something. He looked at me, he gave me the meanest look, and uh, but he had a marvelous personality, a great storyteller, and he
Great.
was fun to be around. And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
How important was it, Nick, for players of that generation to have that charisma and that charm, and to be able to work a room and be so personable?
well, I guess it's kind of how they survived in those days, and well, Buddy, he's a little bit of an exception, I think. I don't think everybody that played on the tour was quite such a great storyteller, not quite such a great player, and
Yeah.
uh, and his laugh was a little hard to imitate. It was infectious. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. He was great. In those early days, like the Shreveport days, 70s, early 70s when you met him in Johnson City, was he even then primarily a 9 ball player, or did he dabble in those other games that they played around Johnson City when the gamblers came to town?
it's funny because he kind of stuck a lot to the 9 ball or the 10 ball, and mostly. But I talked to him one time. I said, "You ever played Grady Matthews one pocket?" I said, he said, "Yeah, I played him 15 times, and so far he's never won." And I didn't even know Buddy played one pocket at the time.
Well, I
So,
just kind of assumed that being from Kentucky that he played
Yeah.
some banks and some one pocket.
well, he had to play good banks. We would have kicked him out of the state, but
He always told me that he used to on bank shots that he was a spinner, that he liked to hit the ball straight, but used the transferred English to get the right angle off the rail. Does that ring any bells?
yeah, yeah, he liked to turn the ball,
Yeah.
you know. But he was an awful good bank player. And then one time I asked him, I said, "How come you don't come to New York and play in the straight pool tournaments?" And he said, "Well, I did play in one straight pool tournament. I don't know who all was in it, Dallas West." He said he was in it, and he said he won it.
Okay.
He
I
only
don't.
played, unless he played later, he only played in one straight pool tournament and won it. I didn't even know he even played one pocket in straight pool. And
He
so he
probably
was,
he, he probably saw the notification he had to wear a tuxedo and decided to just stay in Kentucky and go fishing.
Yeah, yeah, it was one time he got to really liking to play golf there when he lived in the Tampa area, and about 25 years ago or so. And so I went over there one time and played with him. And he was a wizard around those greens now. His short game was outstanding.
That's
What,
funny.
what was it like for you, Nick, hearing the news last week that your good friend you've known for so many years had passed away, and how much had you been in contact with him leading up to it?
Well, Mark Wilson did a clinic there in Metropolis at Sully's Billiard Room, and a year and a half, 2 years ago, and he always wanted to do something to help Buddy out, and so I guess Buddy was in the hospital the first day, Saturday, but he came in Sunday, and everybody in the clinic, most of the people from the clinic flew in from other parts of the country, and Buddy got out of the hospital on Sunday morning and came in there and spent most of the day there, and the people were just delighted
Yeah,
to
yeah,
see him, and he was the type of guy pretty hard not to like him. He just had that personality where you felt like you known him your whole life when you first met him, and
yeah. He's
and he was a humble person too, except when it come to playing pool. He said he didn't know. Somebody asked him one time who was the best 9-ball player, if he was the best, and he said, "Well, I don't know," but he says, "I do think I'm the best bar table player of anybody." But
wow.
he kind of was humble with the big table, but
Yeah, yeah,
he'd certainly be. I think he said who he thought was Luther Laster. He thought he was the best 9-ball player of all time, but if he excluded himself,
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
but Buddy certainly be a strong candidate.
Yeah, he sure would. He sure would. Yeah.
What made him so tough to compete against, Nick?
Well, there was two guys that actually both of them kind of helped my game because it seems like coming from the collegiate background, playing straight pool and stuff. You know, you were always trying to keep from giving your opponent an open table. You wanted to end your run by playing safe, not missing a ball, because if you run 80 balls or something and miss a break shot or something, why, against those players like Mizrak and Siegel, like Rimpey, Hopkins, those guys, is like an even match because they come firing right back at you. And so that uh, I watched, and when the game was kind of moving from straight pool to 9-ball, a lot of the straight pool players, they said, "Oh, 9-ball is just a lucky game," and it did kind of break my heart because I really loved the straight pool. And but then I watched Buddy and Siegel; those two guys, they were winning like every 9-ball tournament. This was the late '70s, and I'm thinking, well, how lucky can this game really be? and I watched those guys, and those two guys, Siegel and Buddy, they played so good at the end of a match. It seemed like they, I mean, they knew how to duck when it was necessary, but it seems like if they had a hard shot or something, they went for it, and it seems like they played better at the end of the match than the beginning. It seems, and every time I ever played those guys, if I happened to win, one thing I always felt like I played like 9 on a 10 scale because Siegel and Buddy, they so consistent that they just didn't play no 5 speed or 6 speed. They're
Yeah,
consistent.
yeah,
Consistency was incredible, and the ability to play good at the end gate and to play so good under pressure and to be able to make so many hard shots at the end. And they were premier 9-ball players.
yeah. Well, Mike, I think Mike even said that, you know, Mike was known for if he got to a title match, he was winning. But he said the few times he did lose in the title match, it was more times to Buddy than anybody else.
What was that rivalry like, Mike, back in those days, and how deep was the tournament? Like, give us some perspective here.
I mean, well, perspective wise, I mean, you know, you look at, if you want perspective of what that era was like, just look at the Hall of Fame. I mean, it's you know, the whole right side of the bracket is in the Hall of Fame between Buddy and Nick and Steve and Hopkins and Rempe and Siegel. You know, this is all before Efren and Earl, even, and so.
And Earl and Johnny, I mean,
Yeah,
those were premier.
But you know, so these guys were. This was as good. This was as good as it gets. And you know, for Nick to have the type of year he had in '89, and for Buddy to have those types of years he had, it was tough to dominate a year on that tour because the competition was so stiff. But really, through the mid late '80s, you know, I think, well, Mike quit a little bit earlier, but Mike and Nick and Buddy, you know, that was a pretty good bet. One of those three was winning whatever tournament you walked into.
Well, one thing that was hard to do back in those days, and was if you couldn't get by Buddy, if you couldn't get by Mike, or if you couldn't get by Earl, or if you couldn't get by Johnny, it was hard to win a tournament.
A long list.
That's a long list.
Those guys were right there at the top, and they didn't come along peacefully. I tell you that.
Yeah, most of them went down kicking and screaming.
What was a memorable gambling match that you recall Buddy being in, and who was his opponent, Nick?
Probably that Efren match was the most famous one I know. Because that was before Buddy quit drinking, and I think he had been up all Saturday night and didn't go to bed, as far as I know, on Sunday. And they played late on Sunday evening, probably 10 o'clock or something. And
wait, that's a whole other layer to this story, Nick. That's just unbelievable.
That's when
he's been up the whole night on Saturday, and then barks at Efren before he knew Efren was. But the guy's coming off of a tournament win.
Yeah, he told me. I walked into. They had like a little restaurant area there at Red's, and he said, "I'm going to play this Efren," and any steakhouse came in there, and he said Buddy was like kind of wasted. That was before, I think he quit drinking in the early '90s, but this was before that 5 or 6 years. And he says, you better get in there and start drinking that coffee, because he says, I'm not putting any money up the way you look right now. and I don't think he ever went to bed. Maybe he did, but yeah, that was he.
So
he had an incredible ability to win. And one time, this was, I don't know if it's in the 70s, probably, he said that he won 8 tournaments. They were kind of regional tournaments and 2 or 3 day tournaments. He said that he won 8 of them. And he said every one of them he won with a different pool cue. Now, that's incredible. That's incredible.
How is that? Players are so finicky when it comes to their equipment, Nick.
Yeah, he knew a lot about cues, though. At least he knew a lot about how he liked his cues. He was really into cues, but
he played with a Mucci back then, didn't he? Mostly.
Yeah, he played a lot with a Mucci. He was a big fan of Mucci cues, and then some people say that not too long ago, a friend of mine here from Kentucky, Barney Kennis, showed 2 cues that were Bill Schick cues, and he's high end. Yeah. I mean, he's high end cue maker, and Buddy was always trying to get a cue, and then Buddy sell them, and that happened to me too. We did some videos about 15 years ago, and we went on exhibition tour to promote them, and anyway, Buddy, I'm selling my cues after the tournament. Buddy picks up one and says, man, this cue hits good, he said. He said, I believe I can play real good with this cue. So I said, go ahead and take it. And And anyway, a year or two later, he calls me up wanting another cue. I said, I just give you a cue. He said,
He sold it.
yeah, yeah. So finally, he called me like he really wanted one. He called me 3 or 4 or 5 days in a row. Finally, I said, okay, I'll go pick you out a really nice one, and I'll hit some balls with. Be sure it hits good. Be sure the tip's good. And so I sent it to him. He called back to thank me, and he said, I said, well, see if you can hang on to this one a little bit longer.
Yeah, yeah,
But they say a lot of people think he put Bill Schick on the map, and this one guy in Kentucky's got two of his cues. Boy, they're nice. One of them has a window, and I think Bill Schick signed it, and Buddy signed it, and I think it has Buddy's name in the window. And he
huh,
said Schick told him that was worth 15,000 that cue a long, long time ago, and
yeah.
so yeah, he was high end cue maker.
I think back in those days, Buddy was a lot like Efren. They'd use a cue, and at the end of the tournament, they'd sell it, and then they'd have another cue for the next tournament.
Yeah, yeah, it even yeah, he was constantly trying to get another one from almost, I guess, anybody. And
Yes.
when I give him that first cue, we're in New Orleans, and then we go to Houston to do some exhibitions. He's over there talking to another cue maker, trying to cut a deal.
He's
Yeah,
planning ahead.
yeah, those were the pool players from the '80s and '90s, man. That was a time.
They say a friend of mine said that he's one of the best guys at raffling off a cue. But he said he had a tournament, the Tennessee State Open, and he said Mucci ran out of cues. They was raffling like one after the next, and said Buddy was selling them tickets. Said man, he knew how to get that money.
Well, Buddy was, yeah, Buddy could talk you into anything. He
Yeah.
was, he had that type of charm and that type of personality and confidence in himself. I mean, he was, you know, he was. You talk about the charisma and stuff like that. Yeah, that came in real handy when he was, selling things, making games, whatever he had to do. Buddy could, say what needed to be said.
Well, what's funny about when after Mark did that clinic, he called me up. I said, "How's Buddy doing?" And he said, "It don't look too good. He just got out of the hospital on Sunday, and he said he came out for a few hours." But I said, "Well, I'd like to see him again." So I drove down there a couple days later, and anyway, we were having dinner there at Solly's. Solly's has real good food, and then I took a picture of us, and later on the next day or something, I put it on Facebook. Or a friend of mine, you might know this guy too, Mike Tom Gearhart from Toledo, Ohio. He used to run those Glass City Opens.
Yeah.
He says, "Boy," he says, "I've got all these cue balls." He said, "I need Buddy to sign some of them." So I told him the same thing Mark said. I said, "Well, you better not dilly dally. You better head down there because he didn't look too good." And then he went down there and he's having a hard time. He talked to Buddy, but he couldn't. He knocked on his door at the apartment. Nobody answered, and he's trying to get hooked up with him. And so finally, he said, after 2 days in Metropolis, he said, "We're going back to Toledo, but I'm going to call the pool room one more time." Well, he called it, and Solly said, "Well, he's back here watching a match right now." And so he went over. Everybody signed balls for 4 hours. He gave him like 1,500 or something, and then Tom got home and he thought, boy, I better go back and get some more balls signed. And he went back and give him like another 1,500. But he said the second time he went, he had no trouble getting in touch with him.
Funny how that works. Funny
That's
how
so funny.
that,
9 p.m.
great
What,
stuff. Great
what was
stuff.
it like? What was it like getting together with his friends and family, Nick, last week and celebrating Buddy for the service?
Oh, I didn't realize how big his family is.
Yeah,
I posted the thing on Facebook. He had 18 great grandchildren.
yeah.
He had 8 grandchildren, and he had 5 children. I didn't realize how big his family was. Huge. And I got a chance to visit with them all, and yeah, everybody misses him. And they told one funny thing during the service. They said all the grandchildren, one of them up there said, "Yeah," said everybody knows every time one went on Buddy's lap, he said, "You know, you're my favorite." And he told that to every one of
Well, with 18, with 17, 18 grandkids, he probably couldn't remember which one he told it to last time.
Yeah, no kidding.
them.
Yeah.
And so,
What about, memorable matches that you played him in tournaments? How many times did you play him in big title matches? I'm trying to remember if there were that many of them.
there wasn't that many.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
Usually we played before the finals. We played. Let's see. I know we played. They've been showing it on Facebook or YouTube. I guess they've been showing a match we played in Reno,
Right.
and we played more than once there in Reno. I remember one time I was a game or two ahead close to the end, and I had him hooked. He kicked a long rail ball in, and I mean split the wicket. Got, I mean it was a hard shot, and we played some challenge. We played a big challenge match one time in St. Louis, and then that was memorable because it was a long races, and then. Uh, Boy, he beat me in that Willards when I was really playing good. He won
That
that
was
tournament at
yeah, that
Willards, 40 G's or something.
33,000 for first.
33.
Yeah. He didn't beat you in the final, did he?
No, no, he beat me, I think, in the quarterfinals or something like that.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember who he played in the final of that event, but I remember that was 91, I think, right around there.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And
Yeah.
what's funny, he was a nice guy, but on the table when you're playing a match, he was a little cantankerous.
Yeah, he was.
He wasn't exactly Mr. Nice Guy, but what
No.
was funny about the whole thing was when the match was over, it just like he just was just the normal Buddy Hall, but boy, when you was competing, he uh he was a little testy. Is the best way I guess
Yeah,
to
yeah.
put it. He was a
Yeah,
little
yeah.
I
testy.
love
If
that.
things weren't going well, Buddy did not hide his feelings at the table. Was it Buddy that Tommy Kennedy beat in the final of the US Open, or was that Johnny?
That was Johnny.
It was Johnny. Okay. Okay. I remember being at a US Open match where Buddy was in the final or near the final, and he was playing someone, and he just sat over. They had the little pub tables always for the players to sit at under the higher chairs. And Buddy was just sitting over there, and he was stewing. He was not happy, and yeah,
But what amazed me is how good he brushed it all. You know, one thing about Sigel and Buddy, I say, they just like Ephraim, they were all really set such a good example. When the match was over, they would all sit there and talk to you about it, and no animosity. They didn't say, "Oh, you got lucky," or you
right.
know, they
Although
they
Siegel would diagram a couple shots that he should have made, but
yeah yeah, and
Dennis Hatch, Marty Herman's right. Yeah, he played Dennis Hatch.
in the finals of the U.S. Open,
Yeah,
and I think Buddy come from behind in
yeah,
that
he
match.
did.
It looked like, and Dennis was young. I think
Dennis was
22
very
or
young.
something.
I think it went to the hill.
Yeah, and Buddy won on that hill, and then Buddy won later. Was it 2000 or 2001? He would have been pretty old then.
It was 98 when he won the U.S. Open.
Okay, so
Yeah,
he won
98.
in
He
what?
was 53 when he won the U.S. Open.
Okay,
Is that right?
okay.
53.
Wow.
And this
Wow.
was the U.S. Open with a lot of, think about who was still playing top of their game in 1998. That was a pretty stout field back then.
Oh yeah, yeah. Those camel tours, those fields were tough.
Yeah.
What do you think the difference is, Nick, between players of your generation and players from now?
Well, hmm. uh, well, one thing that kind of gets me is it seems like we played on slower cloth, and so we were used to hitting the back of the pocket. We shot firmer, where today it seems like so many shots people just roll them in, and that's one big change. The break is just as important back then as today. Basically, if you didn't break as good as your opponent, you couldn't hardly get to that winner's circle.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, let's see well, the fields I think are deeper
Yeah.
with a
Right.
higher level. I'm not sure the top level's any higher. That's
Yeah. I think.
pretty hard to say, but I don't think anybody played better than Buddy and Siegel today. But I could be wrong, I guess. But I don't think so. I think the top is no higher, but I think there's a lot more players closer to that level.
I
Yeah.
love that. I love that
Yeah.
assessment.
I think I would agree with that for sure. Um, yeah.
What was he like as a friend, Nick? Off the table, hanging out away from it.
Buddy,
Yeah.
oh, he was just great. I mean, he just was in. He just was so friendly and no arrogance about him. I mean, he he's just a nice guy, just a nice guy, interesting to be around, and had charisma,
Yeah.
and the pool world really lost a good one there.
Yeah. They sure did. They sure did. You never saw Buddy, you know, talking politics, pool politics or getting into arguments about anything. I don't think I ever saw Buddy argue with anybody. He just always wanted to smile and talk about stuff that was enjoyable to talk about. He was never one to sit around trying to prove a point. He was just as easygoing. I mean, it's what you would imagine Buddy Hall, growing up in Metropolis, Illinois, sneaking away from school so he could go fishing, and sitting by the river. He had that type of Tom Sawyerish type of appeal to him, where he was just as easygoing as they came.
Well, I remember he had that in Metropolis. They had that Buddy had that. I think he got the either the city or the casino to sponsor that Superman opener in. I think it was around 2002, might have been 2003, and he played all those old school rules like they did at Johnson City, like loser break, you spot all balls. I remember at the players' meeting, one guy said, "Why should I be penalized if my opponent scratches on the break?" He said, "Well, we'll make a special rule for you. We'll allow you to pass it if you want to your opponent." and
uh, yeah, funny.
How do you want Buddy to be remembered, Nick?
Well, I think he's just a great guy and fun guy to be around, and I love to be around him and engage in conversation with him. And then obviously he has to go down in history as one of the greatest pool players of all time.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
What was it like back then, Mike? Whenever you're like traveling around and covering pool, and news gets around, obviously different than the way it does now. How did you build a reputation in those days, Mike?
As a player,
Yeah.
um, you know, built a reputation by winning matches and all the gambling stories about what city you broke and but you also built a reputation on how you treated everybody. And Buddy treated everybody great. Buddy wasn't a high hat guy. He wasn't, he didn't just want to hang around with the top players. He hung around with everybody, talked with everybody, become friendly with everybody. Uh, you know, he was just that type of guy, and that's the way you build a reputation in the game too, and that's why he had such a level of respect from everybody. Was because he never gave anybody a reason to have a bad thing to say about him. He was just always um, you know straightforward guy and super nice guy and intelligent and funny. Like Nick said, great storyteller. I mean, Nick, you worked some AccuStats matches with him. he was
Oh,
hysterical on those Agastats matches.
oh, he was so good. It was unbelievable. And what's funny, I remember a match him and Grady did, and it was a match. It was a match I played with Siegel. It was right for the finals, a match for the finals,
Was
and
that the one where he was ahead
he
by
was
all that?
he was leading by 9-2, and I'm telling you what, I listened to that match the other day. Somebody sent me a link for that match, and oh my gosh, yeah, Buddy was outstanding on the commentary.
Yeah,
Just he just saw things so quick, and he saw, he saw like when he was commentating, he saw things so quick, and a lot of times he saw that extra possibility that a lot of people never happened to. His knowledge was just fantastic.
and he could always throw in a great zinger in there too. I mean, he could always,
Yes,
take a shot that was always hysterical. He was terrific.
yes, he was.
Yeah.
How big was the action back in those days, Nick? And you mentioned that he kind of camped out in Shreveport for some time, and had an open offer to anyone. How big were some of these games, and how tough was it to make a game with a guy like Buddy Hall?
Well, if you wanted to play even, it was real simple. Just call heads or tails.
Just knock on the door. That's it, right?
Even I'm in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they say Louis Roberts went down there, and Buddy beat him so bad he had to end up working at the pool room to get out of town. Took him a year to get. Took 6 months or a year for him to get out of town, Shreveport.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, Louis, that was another one who never held a cue for more than 2 days.
Yeah, it was fun going down there to the funeral and visiting with the family, and then visiting with a lot of the players, because after the funeral, everybody went to Solly's, the pool room. So
Yeah.
you heard story after story, and it was fun.
Yeah. 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 Were there any old timers there?
And I think one of the nicest things at the service uh, was they said that the minister said that uh, Buddy was totally at peace at the end, and he was happy to go. He had no fear, no doubt, and so I think that was fantastic.
Yeah, that's
That's
nice. That's
that's
nice.
amazing to hear.
Nice sentiment. Yeah.
What was his thoughts on the game pool, at this point of his life, and towards the tail end of it, and what was his attitude like, his spirits like, his all those things, Nick?
Well, when we was on that exhibition tour, it killed him that he got where he couldn't play very long. And he said, I see all these players. He said that in my prime would have been easy to get that money. And he said, but I can't play long enough to get it, he said.
That is so funny. Well, Nick, I appreciate you making time for us. I know it's not the easiest of topics whenever you have a close friend that you lose, but he's a legend, and it was great to kind of have you on and share some stories. Mike, you got anything else before we get out of here, my man?
No, no, Nick. Great recollections of Buddy. It's always great to look back at a career like that and a person like that and share those stories. And you had some doozies there.
Well, I feel like I was lucky to, with those players like Buddy, Siegel, Rimpey, Hopkins, Miserak, and
Yeah,
even Johnny and Earl. It was, I feel like I come through kind of some of the golden years of pool
yeah,
where those were great players, and uh, to be able to compete with those guys, uh, I feel real fortunate.
yeah, yeah. Well, they were fortunate too.
Absolutely, Nick Varner, Hall of Famer. We appreciate you having you on. Thanks for making time for us. We look forward to having you on again soon in the future, and we'll see you guys real soon. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us. We'll be live with another show tomorrow. Take care.